once one of these schools breaches an angle, I think you're going to see 5 to 7 schools leave. So they're going to have to add a lot. But if I think that if you saw 2 schools leave, you're probably going to add some more, and you're going to reach out to any breathing, semi-able-bodied school to fill the void.
All right, welcome to a little bit of a different video here. You'll notice that there's a little bit of a change to the set here. There's some non-Boise State stuff around. We got a Trevor Lawrence jersey here in the corner. We got a little Clemson splash painting here behind me. And that is because we have Brian from Clemson Football Live on today, a dedicated Clemson fan. He does a lot of the same stuff that I do here at the Boise State side of things. He's talking that stuff with Clemson. You should definitely check out his channel, whether you're a fan of Clemson football, you're a fan of college football. Even as not a Clemson fan myself, I have a ton of fun watching Brian, the way that he analyzes and discusses college football. But the reason I brought a Clemson fan on today is because we're going to be talking about the ACC. I've done a couple of videos talking about the realignment potential of what's going on. There's some lawsuits in the wind that could lead to some future changes for that conference. And everything in college football relates to everything else in college football. If something happens with the ACC, it has a trickle-down effect to other conferences on the West Coast, to the Group of Five in general, and potentially we could see a situation happening here where potentially there's some openings in the Power Five for a team, or Power Four now, for teams like Oregon State, Washington State, or even Boise State to have a chance of moving up, whether that's, we'll talk about it in the video, but whether that's through the ACC or potentially through the Big 12 with realignment shifting. We'll talk about it all. It's going to be a great discussion, but I wanted to bring somebody on that a little bit of an ACC East Coast mindset who could delve deeper into this with us. And that's why I brought on Brian. I discovered him because my wife is a Clemson fan, hence the Clemson gear here today. And she hit me up a little while ago and she was like, hey, I love your videos. I love what you're doing. You know, it's fun. I love sitting down and watching with you. But so it's all Boise State. Like, I need some Clemson stuff. And she said, can you find me someone who does what you do for Clemson? So I hit up another YouTube colleague that I've gone some of his stuff with, Couzes from Couzes Corner, another fantastic channel. And he pushed me towards Brian, and I watched his stuff, and it's awesome. It is just great content. You watched all his videos, so I knew he'd bring a great perspective today. This is going to be a great discussion. We're going to talk a little bit about what's going on with ACC up front. Like, what is the situation here from a West Coast layman's perspective? We're going to have Brian lay it on us. What's going on with the Clemson and Florida State? There's a lawsuit brewing in the ACC. They're potentially trying to get out, potentially trying to do some other things. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about this fallout and what it could potentially shift to. So just right off the bat, what's going on? You know, for someone who's a little bit clueless to the situation, maybe coming into it blind, just brief overview. What is going on the East Coast there?
Brief overview. Well, there's a lot of details. Let's start off with that. There's a lot of years of really hard feelings towards the former / current leadership in the ACC between some of the schools, namely Florida State. Clemson's getting in on the action, some of the other schools as well. And it all really goes back to money and the thought that the ACC has not fulfilled their end of the contract by looking out for their members. So I'll try to give you like a overview, as I said. And I also want to start off with this. I'm not a lawyer, and most of us who's discussing this, they're not lawyers. Okay. Unless you are a lawyer, you're not a lawyer. So there's a lot of moving parts here. And so the disdain with the ACC goes back to the former commissioner, Mr. Swofford. I want to say John Swofford. And there was a deal that was cut between he and Raycom. Raycom they had TV rights and blah, 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 blah. His son worked there as an executive, and Raycom was struggling. There's a whole story on this. I challenge everyone to Google it, go check it out, blah, blah. But in trying to conserve time, there was a deal that was cut between Raycom and the between ESPN, and it just, at the end of the day, it did not favor the ACC as much as it did Raycom. And then the whole grant of rights deals that was signed back in what 13 and then re-signed somewhere around 16. And then this whole ACC network, which by the way, if anyone's ever taken the time to watch the ACC network, I'm not dogging on their personalities over there. Though some of them are they're just okay. But when you watch the ACC network and then you turn over to, I don't know, the SEC network, it's night and day. I mean, I've jokingly called the ACC network the PBS or QVC network of college sports. I mean, you watch the networks that are affiliated with the Big Ten. It's really nice and crisp. But we're over here at what, a shutdown QVC doing the ACC network. I mean, it looks bad. But what really stuck the dagger in the ACC members' back and twisted it and then pushed the lawsuits is really the money that these other schools are getting in other conferences. The Big Ten creating the mini super conference, having a team from sea to shining sea, seeing the money that's being divvied out per the college football playoff that was just released weeks ago. That really spit in the face of the ACC members. And that's really, I think, really pushed Florida State even farther into this thing. And then Clemson at first was going to dive in somewhere around December. And now they've went in, head first. So it's kind of led us there. I know I've said a lot here, but the idea is that Florida State is saying, hey, you're not acting. In fact, I'm going to read from the Florida State. There's 7 different counts that they're charging. This is Florida State now. They're charging that the ACC punishments are unenforceable under Florida law. The ACC punishments are unenforceable penalties. The ACC materially breached its own contract with Florida State. I'll skip a few more because they're a lot of the same: fundamental failure or frustration of contractual purpose. Let me see. The ACC punishments violate Florida public policy or some other word that I can't pronounce at this point. How Clemson's lawsuit differs from Florida State is Clemson is saying, hey, look, how we're reading this, if we're not in the conference, you don't own the rights to our television earnings. So that's kind of how it's a little different. I think there's another little nuance in there. But I have said in the past, Bronco, that I believe that these member schools who are considering entering a lawsuit with the ACC are trying to get different angles, because if one angle gets shut down, everybody shut down, we have to go back to the drawing board. But if you have multiple angles and you get a breach, and also it relies heavily on the judge you get. If one's in, everybody's in. So hopefully I gave you a nice little synopsis there. I know someone in the comment section will be like, you forgot this. I'm sure I did. There's a lot of details.
No, I think that's really good. And I know that Clemson was saying that right now their exit fees would be something in the excess of about $140 million. And that doesn't even include the guarantee of rights, which you touched on, which for anybody that's not familiar with that, basically, like you said, means that even if Clemson were to leave the conference for the next, I think it is 10 years, something like 2036, something like that, the ACC would own their television rights. And so they would be the ones that would be marketing those, and then Clemson would not be able to independently market those or be able to, through another conference, market those TV rights, like something through the SEC or something like that. So that doesn't even include buying back their own TV rights. Do you think that for Clemson to leave the conference, first off, do you think their intention is to actually leave the conference, or are they just saying, hey, there's an unfair situation and we want to be able to have openings and opportunities and options? So first off, do you think they're actually trying to leave the conference? And secondly, with such a large penalty, potential of $140 million plus, I read somewhere that buying back guaranteed rights would be somewhere up to $300 million total. Do you think that they need to win? They need those to be dropped for them to actually be able to leave the conference. So first, do they actually intend to leave the conference, do you think? And secondly, regardless of where this lawsuit goes, are they going to try to leave, or do they need to win this lawsuit to have a chance of leaving?
First, I believe they are trying to leave. I believe Florida State's trying to leave. They're sick of the ACC and just the whole relationship going all the way back to what I referenced a while ago. You have a conference who basically is holding their member schools hostage. Nobody wants to be part of the ACC unless you're in the state of North Carolina or maybe some other school who doesn't care about football because you're terrible at football. Next, they need to win this. This is a lot of money. The only way I can see them getting out of this is if another conference came along and said, hey, we'll foot the bill for this, because as I like to point out, when you and I are talking about millions of dollars, that's a lot of money to us. But when you're dealing with these conferences who are looking at a legacy move and building the super mini conference like the Big Ten has done, maybe somebody comes along and says, hey, we'll foot the bill and take care of you. You just have to sign a contract saying you're not going to try the same shenanigans with us, but at the same time, we'll take care of you. And just on that note, before it leaves my mind here, there is, within this lawsuit that Florida State filed, the ACC found out about a February 2025 date that was hidden from all of the member schools, meaning that ESPN, or it consists of ESPN, has the option to renegotiate or opt out of the contract by 2025, which would allow the member schools out of the contract paying no penalty. Well, the ACC hid this from their member schools. And so at this point, all of these institutes are going, what else are you hiding from us? And with good question, especially when you look at the history of the ACC, scratching its own backs and people they like or kin to their backs. So a lot of people are wondering if maybe the Big Ten would try to swoop in, as I first said, and buy them out, because the Big Ten has presence everywhere except for the Southeast. And that would be a great way to be a pain in the butt of SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey. That would be one. Or because ESPN is so big on the whole, the SEC thing, ESPN says, hey, we'll let you out, but you have to go in the SEC. So that's what I see. I don't see them raising the money to get out of this just to pay out. I really don't see them doing that.
Yeah, because like I said, somewhere close to $200 to $300 million total if they don't win. Clemson has about $1 billion endowment. Again, I'm not a lawyer or a finance guy, but when you look at the pie chart of their endowment, it shows 4% goes to unrestricted spending, so they can spend on whatever they want. 26% goes to department program support, which I think would include athletics. So potential of about 30% or $300 million that they could push towards that. But then you're done. Like, you got no other money left. Some people have raised the point, though, that say you go into some kind of debt, some kind of loan program, you go into debt on this, you get out of the ACC, you're then going to get a 12% increase from the CFP. You're going to go from a 17%, I believe it is, to a 29% of the profits going from the ACC to the Big Ten or SEC. And then the TV deal for the SEC and the Big Ten. I mean, you're talking that within 5 years, you could make up however much you had to spend to get out of the ACC, even if you had penalties. But you're saying you don't think that's probably where they're going to go. You think that they're going to need to win this case for them to actually get out. They're not going to get into the debt revenue and then try to earn it back on the back end.
I think at this point anything could be possible, but I think the first attempt is to just get out via lawsuit. And I think that they're trying to overwhelm the ACC with the lawsuit as well. I mean, lawsuits are expensive. Then you're in multiple lawsuits. Then there's just the public shame of a conference holding their members hostage. It's like nobody wants to be here. I mean, good grief, during the NCAA tournament, the commissioner of the ACC was at the Clemson basketball games. They made it to the Elite Eight, which is like the parting of the Red Sea for us Clemson fans when it comes to basketball. I mean, that was a miracle. I mean, that was like lightning striking a unicorn that's winning the lottery. That doesn't happen to us in basketball. But I mean, he was just sitting there. I mean, there's no love lost between us and the ACC. It makes them look really, really bad. But could someone come along and say, hey, if we go into some type of program, you're right. Maybe they'll do it, because 5 to 10 years is a long time to a lot of us. But, when you're making a legacy move, it's no big deal.
Yeah, you also have to keep in mind though that these decisions aren't just made by athletic focused folks. If it was made by the fans, Clemson would be out today. You also got academic presidential decisions being made by presidents of these universities that have all their focus on the academics, and that's always something I've had a problem with the Pac-12 and the ACC. Now the Pac-12 is gone, but Pac-12 and the ACC is they almost seem to prioritize that academics over their athletic side of things. There, I agree with you. I think I know a lot of people, when they just come down to like football specifics and cost ratios, they're like, well, why wouldn't Clemson just take the debt and get out? I think that the fact that they're even considering leaving the academic association of the ACC in the first place is a huge step. If then you also had to come to their board, to their trustees, and say, in addition to us leaving this association to go somewhere else because of athletics, because of football only, we're also going to have to pay 300 million out of our own pockets and hope that we get it back in TV money. I just don't know if that is something that they sign off on, because it's not the coaches making this decision, not the athletic directors, not the fans. It's the presidents and the board of trustees of these universities that tend to be about 97 years old and maybe watch football game back when it was black and white, so it's you tend to have a lot of different, you have to include that into the decision making. So I agree with you. I think that they got to win this. Is the feeling that they're going to? Is there? I mean, obviously, you're not a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. Is there a sense down there in South Carolina that you guys are have a good shot of winning this thing?
There's just a lot of uncertainty at this point. I mean, I think with the ruling in Florida a week or two ago, with Florida State getting some form of a win after the ACC just got some form of a win of where the law. I mean, you hear that and it's like, what did he just say? I mean, there's just so many moving pieces to this puzzle, and I think that what would make me feel a little better is to see the University of North Carolina, and the reason I name them out is because they've been named a lot of a lot of things hinging on them of possibly coming into the lawsuit and who might follow them. There's a rumor. I don't know the ins and outs about this. So if someone does, please leave it in the comment section. But I've heard that if North Carolina leaves, NC State has to go with them either by law or some type of pact. I don't know. But there's a lot of questions about UNC, where they're at, why they haven't entered the lawsuit. Interestingly enough, because I'm a nosy person, I looked up the background of the judge in Charlotte who ruled in favor of the ACC. Oddly enough, he got his undergrad from the University of North Carolina, which I found kind of odd. Found kind of odd. And for anyone else out there at the West Coast, on the West Coast, however I'm supposed to say that, when you think about legal institutions, some of the top law schools in the country is actually in the ACC. You start off with Duke. I think they're ranked number 6 according to U.S. News right now, followed by Virginia, University of North Carolina, Wake Forest. I think you're going down the line, you have Boston College. So, I've jokingly said, but I'm kind of serious. I mean, can you imagine taking that contract, walking over to your law school, tossing it in the middle of those professors and those law students and go, take this baby apart? I mean, so a lot of people's kind of wondering why North Carolina has not entered in yet. I've heard that there's fighting within Chapel Hill, and you have to understand about the state of North Carolina as well. They might have a good football team here and there, but their basketball teams, I mean, they're God. I mean, it's North Carolina and Duke, and then their relationship to the ACC. So it's just, there's a lot of moving pieces here. But to go back and answer your question, I really don't know. I'm hopeful because they waited before just jumping in on the same lawsuit as Florida State. But I'm hopeful. I've kind of said that I think there's a 60% chance they win and 40% chance they lose. So, but where I'm getting that number from, I have no clue. It's just my gut.
Oh yeah, just pulling it out. I like that you mentioned North Carolina and North Carolina State, because that kind of leads us into the second part of this video. Is Florida State, Clemson, they're both looking for the door. If they win this thing, or at least partially win, like say they get like a 50% or 60% drop in these rates, and the exit fee goes from 140 to 300 million to something like 50 to 100 million, something manageable that they can handle, especially if that guarantee of rights gets dropped. I think that's the biggest issue, is that long-term guarantee of rights. So especially if that gets ruled as unenforceable. Who else looks for the door here with ACC? You mentioned some other teams that are kind of tied at the hip to the ACC, but who else is potentially looking, and who else would even have an opportunity to maybe advance up to the Big Ten or the SEC or something else like that?
Well, that's a heck of a question, because as you're asking me that, I kind of think about the people who are they are patient opportunists. They let someone come along and do the hard work, and then once the floodgates are open, everybody like me too. I'm going, man. I'm here with you, brother. It's like, yeah, where were you during the lawsuit? I mean, I could see North Carolina, NC State hopping out. There's been rumors of, Virginia being unhappy, which Virginia is not a great football power. If you want a great institute, as far as, academics, get the University of Virginia. They're fantastic. Football hasn't been a great thing at Virginia, like consistently, since, old man George Welsh and the Barber twins. I know they had a couple of good years with Bronco Mendenhall, but nothing like the consistency and the brutality of the George Welsh years. So I don't know if anyone is like jumping to get the University of Virginia right now, other than academic reasons. But there's been rumors about University of Virginia, Louisville, a few other schools. Virginia Tech, I think, was mentioned at one time. But at North Carolina, definitely, I could see them making a move. And the Big Ten and the SEC, neither one of them has a presence in the state of North Carolina. Now, for the SEC, where the problems that Florida State and Clemson's run into was there's the University of South Carolina. Even though they're terrible and we beat them like redheaded stepchildren, they're already in the state of South Carolina, hence the name. Florida State, of course, they have Florida. And then, interestingly enough, University of Miami, their athletic director is Dan Radakovich. Dan Radakovich was Clemson's athletic director from, forgive me for the years if I've got it wrong, but it's somewhere around 2012 to about, just a few years ago. And he sang the sweetest, kindest song about the ACC. So in my heart, either he's all ACC or he's been told to keep his mouth shut and toe the company line. So I don't know about the University of Miami, but those other schools, especially the University of North Carolina, NC State, I want to say Virginia was definitely one of them.
So if you had to kind of put a number on it, how many would you say you would look at potentially leaving? Somewhere between 2 to 5, something like, Florida State, Clemson, then UNC, Miami, maybe Duke or something like that. Like about 5 teams would probably look to jump.
I would say at least 5 teams: Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, NC State, Virginia, Louisville. I think that there was a rumor about them. Virginia Tech. So, I mean, you could see the conference kind of fall apart. Now, of course, the ACC now includes Bay Area teams, Stanford, California, and then SMU, which makes more sense than those other 2 teams because there's some southern reference there, right? But the reason they were added is just in case someone were to leave, because I want to say there's some other clause that if the membership fell below a certain number, ESPN could come in and do their thing, which I just find all of this very, very ironic that this all happened at the same time.
So like you said, you got 3 additional just in case teams that you got added. ACC is currently sitting at, I believe, 17 members overall right now. So what would it take, do you think, for the conference to look to add more teams? If they only lose, say, 3 members and they're still at 14, are they feeling comfortable with that number? What's the number of teams that you think are going to need to jump ship for the ACC to feel like, because ACC is a little bit like the Pac-12. They're very elitist in their academics, a little bit in the ivory towers in that sense. They're not looking to just go add teams from everywhere like the SEC and the Big Ten are. So what is the situation that the ACC looks at itself and goes, okay, we got to add some more bodies here?
My opinion, I would probably say if they lose 2 schools,
wow,
they go ahead and add a few more. That's my opinion. Just because you're teetering so close to the edge. But once again, I think once one of these schools breaches an angle, I think you're going to see 5 to 7 schools leave. So they're going to have to add a lot. But if I think that if you saw 2 schools leave, you're probably going to add some more, and you're going to reach out to any breathing, semi able bodied school to fill the voids. And how do you fill the voids of Florida State and Clemson, especially if those are the two to leave, and that's the ones who wants to leave? You know, Clemson dominated the ACC in the 80s during the Danny Ford years. The 90s and part of the 2000s was dominated by Florida State, those great Bobby Bowden teams. Then you had the Florida State turn with Jimbo Fisher, Jameis Winston, won national championship. Dabo Swinney got to going, 6 consecutive playoff appearances, 12 consecutive 10-win seasons, 2 national championships within 3 seasons. I mean, how do you replace those 2 teams? As far as athletic performance, you don't.
Do you think that, I mean, obviously expansion so far has been driven with a large part with academics, but an even larger part on the TV market potentials. You have teams like Rutgers that haven't done anything in college football in my living memory, getting advanced up to the Big Ten. Teams like Maryland getting advanced up to the Big Ten. Teams that haven't done anything in college football world, but they have large markets and they have good academics being advanced. Do you think that the loss of 2 programs, 2 premier programs that put Clemson in the national spotlight, that's not Clemson, sorry, put the ACC in the national spotlight, 2 programs that actually make the ACC relevant, like Florida State and Clemson, do you think the loss of 2 programs like that might actually force the ACC to go against the trend of conference realignment and actually add programs that are good in football first and have some of the other aspects later, like maybe going after a Boise State or maybe going after a Memphis or something like that? Do you think this is enough to push the ACC out of their backwards mindset that they and the rest of the Power 5 have approached conference realignment with so far?
Well, I mean, if they go after the University of California, I mean, why not? I mean, I'm not being crass. It's hilarious. I mean, heck, I was out in San Francisco like 2 months ago for work, and nobody was talking about California. No one was talking about Stanford. I mean, Stanford has had more success over the past 14 years, 15 years than the University of California, and Stanford hasn't had that much success recently. So it was just a warm bodies grab, so to speak. So sure, why wouldn't they go after Boise State? Sure, why wouldn't they go after Memphis? Because at the end of the day, and no offense to anyone, the Big Ten has made their move, and they're still shopping. I'll guarantee you, they're still shopping. The SEC seemed to be the elite premier, and rightfully so, league. But man, the Big Ten, I mean, they stepped up their game. They're adding teams, as I said, from Southern California all the way up to Seattle, go to Nebraska. I mean, the geographical coverage, head on over to, like you said, New Jersey. I mean, this is a joke. The only place the Big Ten does not have a presence is the South. And the South is a hotbed. I mean, this is a religion. It's a religion here in the state of South Carolina. In Georgia, you go to Georgia. Georgia fans are mouthy for a reason. I mean, they love it. I mean, it's a big deal. So I'm interested to see what the move is by the Big Ten, whether they get Clemson or Florida State or not. But I would see the ACC just grabbing. If they're smart, they need to grab someone who's solid in football. They need to grab anyone they possibly can, because Stanford and Cal Berkeley, they're not it. It's a great way to see exactly how many seats in a nice stadium can be left empty. If that's your goal, you've done a heck of a job.
We only have a few minutes left here, so I want to kind of touch on something you've talked about right now. You talk about the Big Ten going down and expanding down there into the South and trying to grab some teams like maybe Clemson, Florida State. But at the end of the day, I mean, Big Ten's got a lot of teams in it already. They can go down and hit the South a little bit, but then their markets, they've kind of hit the numbers they need to there. I mean, I'm not seeing the Big Ten grabbing like 6 ACC schools. You know, maybe 2, maybe 4 but probably closer to 2. SEC, like you said, they've already got the presence. Maybe they make room for a football contender like Clemson or Florida State, but they probably don't have a lot of other reason to go shopping down there. So for the teams that aren't Clemson and Florida State, the rest of the programs there, the SEC Big Ten closes their doors, let's say to them. They say they don't. You say, no, North Carolina State, we don't want you, so we're not going to take North Carolina too. And Duke, we're not too crazy on. Maybe we'll go after Miami. You had like 3 other programs. The rest of the ACC is sitting there. Which conference do you think has the edge to steal teams from the other? Big 12 or the ACC? Which one is stronger? Which one has maybe the better draw factor? Do you see the ACC cannibalizing from the Big 12, or do you see the Big 12 stealing from the ACC?
Big 12, definitely. I mean, the ACC, why go join them? And really, after they have mistreated the 2 football powers of the past off and on 40 years, why? Now, I know someone's going, Florida State didn't join until the late 80s, early 90s. Yeah, I know that, Bubba. I'm just talking about counting Clemson's years that they were powerful in the 80s and winning the championship in 81. Why go anywhere else except the Big 12 if you have the chance? I think that the ACC is so underwater right now when it comes to football. And then just the perception. Why be with them? Let's go to the Big 12. Why not? Let's load up the car and go.
So the last question I got, and I know we're right on the edge of our time here, is ACC in the next 5 years, do they exist? Or if they exist, are they a power conference?
I think that they're the Big East. The Big East just had the national champions crowned in basketball, UConn. UConn two years in a row, Danny Hurley can coach. That's a totally different subject, different video, different channel. But the Big East had an incredible football power. Virginia Tech, University of Miami, Boston College, off and on. And we saw what happened to them. There's probably some other teams I left out that left and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, the Big Ten, the Big East was a great football conference. And now they're no more. They're a basketball conference. And so I think that in 5 years, if any of these lawsuits prevail, or if ESPN grants some wishes and lets some teams out and renegotiates because it's in their favor, and by the way, I believe that's the only way that they let anyone out, I think that you're going to see the ACC become the Big East. Really good basketball. Play great basketball. And then if you just happen to be good at something else, wonderful, great. We'll be there to help you hoist the trophy. But we're not going to put really any time and effort in you. And so I think that it just basically becomes the Big East, which is no big deal in football.
Well, thanks for coming on, man. I know you got another point we got to get to here, so we're going to wrap up there. Thanks for coming on. This is a great discussion. Great to have the East Coast insight there. I think that we hit pretty much everything we wanted to talk about. So it's going to be an interesting next ride. College football world right now is probably one of the most in one of the most interesting times in its entire history. Who would have ever thought Cal and Stanford going to the ACC? Who would have ever thought USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten? Oklahoma and Texas in the SEC. I mean, we're right now, NIL, college football realignment is definitely a great time to have a college football focused YouTube channel. So make sure you guys go out and check Clemson Football Live. I'll put a link to that in the description of this video. Brian, as you've seen today, does a great job. He's a really fun guy to talk with. He knows his stuff, and he brings a very opinionated side, which is what you want to see when you're watching a video. So he has a great content. Make sure you go check him out. Whether you're a Clemson fan or just a general college football fan, he'll have content for you. And then obviously, of course, my channel, it's mostly Boise State, but hey, we're talking ACC right now. We're talking conference realignment. We talk anything major that happens with conference realignment or college football in general. So thanks so much for coming on, everybody. Thanks so much for being part of this. We wanted you to be part of this discussion, so make sure you comment in the comment section below, and I'll try and go through and have that discussion with each and every one of you. So thanks so much for being part of this. Thanks so much for being here, Brian. Thanks so much, everybody, for being here. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you all like, subscribe, and as always, go big blue.